Right. Yeah.
Clap.
Me, you. B2B, I'm going to put in here versus B2C, but that's the whole point of today's discussion. So B2B, B2C, obviously talking from a marketing perspective, can be an e-com perspective, but generally speaking, it's always been us versus them. It's always been a B2B versus a B2C thing. Lots of discussion around how they're so different and blah, 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 blah. So it's the versus has always been in the middle of B2B and B2C when people have talked about different approaches, given different assignments and objectives from a marketing perspective. Firstly, and very simply, do you agree that there are so many differences in, I'll keep it general, so many differences between B2B and B2C from a marketing perspective that in between B2B and B2C is a versus, or should it be and, should it be or what?
I think it should be client.
Oof. Yeah, as in objective.
Just, I mean, B2B and B2C, yeah, fine. Does it matter? No.
End of episode. Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things like we've talked about with PR and digital PR versus traditional PR, and we end up saying the line between the two is so blurred. Like, are we not ultimately just talking about, I mean, when I'm going back to B2B and B2C, or B2B versus B2C, we're not ultimately just talking about the sort of user or the consumer at the end of the line being human. Why is B2B, how is B2B not so human? And there's again a big thing at the moment about marketing in B2B is so stale and non-human and non-personable. Like, why? If you still you've still got human consumerism. I'm not sure about that word. If you're watching,
Perception.
Yeah.
I know what you're trying to get at. I think my view on it is like, I think B2C clients are the fame clients, are the sexy clients, because they're either trying to be well known or are well known. But from a marketer's perspective, I believe the capability to move needles for B2B is much, much greater.
What sort of things have you observed in your experience that qualify that? What have you, I mean, you've done plenty of B2B. We're a B2B ourselves. But yeah, what examples can you give that justify that and qualify that sentiment about the needle movers?
Well, to give an example, drawing from experience, manufacturing, boring on the face of it.
Yeah.
Hard to be invigorated. However, it's quite an old school sector. So capability to innovate, easier. And the speed in which big business in that sector have adopted digital is behind the curve, generally, I would say. So that means that if a big B2B in manufacturing has had the thought and the foresight to think, right, we need to improve our digital, that gives you such a good opportunity to be out in front. That in terms of like delivering results in a sector that hasn't really done too much or that isn't known for that, it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, it feels like, if you describe it in another way that we're all familiar with, like, it almost feels like less saturated, doesn't it? Opportunity headroom.
Yeah.
Is more.
But the other
sizable.
thing that underpins big B2B is generally brand is strong.
I was just about to ask you part two of this. Where does brand fit into this, do you think?
Well, I think like being a small, let's take fashion as a B2C sector example, being a independent startup new fashion brand is like overwhelmingly saturated. So you have to do good, intense and frequent marketing.
I thought you were going to say freak marketing then.
Well,
freak level.
I mean that, it could be described as that, I guess, as certainly from digital PR to get the results.
Yeah.
But whereas someone in manufacturing that's been going a while, that has a hold in the industry, which generally happens, I think, with B2B, they seem to be scaled businesses, certainly the ones that we engage with. The brand that comes with them in that sector is strong, because they will generally specialise at something, and they will own that space, or there will be a handful of people that own that space, so their share is, there's 5 big players that do that one thing. Fashion, there's 3,000,006 that do the same product with a different brand, so that becomes a completely different challenge in a saturated market. Both are very exciting in terms of marketing, and both present different opportunities, but I think the stigma that surrounds B2B needs challenging.
I think it is being challenged. If you think about 5 years ago, that's why I refer to that like blurred line. What do you think about, like, you know, if it's almost like that open goal sort of, it's an open question really, isn't it? Like Hollywood brands, who do you think of? Why do people go
Apple, Tesla?
Why do they go to those?
Because
it's really hard to ignore brand, firstly.
Their
brand investment.
Consumer.
So what do you think it takes? Will it ever get to this point where, if that open question was asked of marketers, non-marketers, you know, Hollywood, who would you love to work with, for example? Obviously, if you're asking non-marketers, like, who are the biggest brands in the world? It's predominantly going to be consumer brands.
I can tell you what people's top 5 would be, consumer brands.
What's it going to take? Will it ever get there where a B2B brand... Where's IBM gone? What are their classes?
They're about.
Where
Nvidia's probably a good example, but I think
true.
Tech is a different beast. Because tech is sexy for business to business.
In particular.
Take tech versus,
I
don't know, steel.
And you're right, innovation. Well, you can't ignore innovation or lack of. But it's just an interesting exercise, isn't it? The B2B versus B2C, and you hit the nail on the head with the word stigma. I do think it's improving, but ultimately, as I went back to when you think of the human at the end of it, you are still communicating or trying to evoke a response, an action out of a human. Even a B2B, I'm going to use inverted commas in case anyone can't see me, transaction. That's still human to human, ultimately.
It is. It's just the journeys are completely different. And
of course,
I would say generally the commitment from that end user is on a different scale.
Consideration.
So, it's a lot different in terms of the attack. But I think from a marketer's perspective, like, I'd be hard pushed to pick by preference a sector to live in. Like, if you said you can only do B2B or B2C, I'd be like, I like doing both, but I don't think I would pick one, because on my validation brain is like, well, B2B's, you can move fucking mountains in B2B, whereas gains sometimes are a little bit more incremental in other sectors that are B2C.
It's interesting. I certainly come from a biased standpoint, but with my career to date, I've been predominantly in marketing and or sales, B2B. So I'm actually I'm a tight ass. So as a consumer, yeah, I'm not. I'm. There are exceptions to the rules, aren't there? And I'm probably one of them. But I'm immediately drawn to B2B. But it's where my experience has been. Do you think there's such a line between the two, that certain almost like creative thinking disciplines wise can't be taken from those more traditional, let's say, B2C marketing efforts, campaigns, strategies, that just absolutely won't work in a B2B setting, or can't work in a B2B setting?
Here's where I think that gets really interesting, because I think B2B businesses that act like B2C businesses are the ones that do marketing well.
Now, do you think they're predominantly tech? No, sorry. Does your mind immediately think of tech businesses when you're thinking what you've just said there? Or do you think of a mixed bag in B2B?
Yeah, tech is an easy one to draw example from. But I think there are B2B brands that behave like B2C brands that do it well in terms of like concepts and getting campaigns to resonate. Because I think that, going back to what you said, it's like there's a human at the end of it.
Mm.
And I think a lot of opinions around B2B is that they're not human.
Yeah, I don't know why that's ever been lost, really. I don't know why it's been separated from... I get it. Decisions, consideration phase can look enormously different. Often looks enormously different to a consumer decision. Granted, the scale of consumer decisions out there. Price point, for example.
Yep.
That said, I do think that this line between B2B and B2C, both from things that we've talked about, that, you know, the sort of consumer or the user side of it, the decision-making process, the marketing campaign input into B2B and B2C, is certainly as blurred as it ever has been. And I think that's a positive, and it's exciting. We've talked about the opportunity and the excitement side of it. The more it gets blurred, the more the sort of early adoption of thinking like a consumer brand can be executed, I feel.
I always find it interesting when you get a brand that straddles both.
Yeah.
Like telecoms, for example, are three who target consumers but also have business.
Yeah.
They do it well.
Yeah.
But they keep the thread. They just change the scenario behind it.
Yeah.
And that would be a good example of, I think there's a campaign running at the moment that they've got where and it's really good marketing. They are showing scenarios, like thinking of one off the top of my head, that it's like a kitchen scene with a load of mums in the middle of the night.
I've seen it. Yeah, it's cracking. Is that
phenomenal advert, well executed.
Yeah.
And they do the same sort of approach, but business scenario based. And I think that's a really good example of someone that straddles both. And I find that really interesting. And I wonder if it's the same people executing both sides of their campaigns.
Not to dumb it down, but it feels a bit templated, but in a positive way. That's it for me. Short and sweet episode for B2B versus B2C, but I think I've got some this or that. So obviously the this or that that's coming first. B2B or B2C.
Do I have to pick?
I haven't written these. Yeah, you have.
I have to pick one.
Yeah. Gun to your head.
Do I get to decide which B2Cs?
No.
B2B then.
I'm with you. Car or train?
Am I driving?
Both. Yeah, you're driving.
Car.
Car. Cultural fit or experience fit?
Culture ad.
Boom. Gig or theatre? I'm guessing that's like music gig.
Oh, that's a fucking hard one.
And theatre could be anything. Could be.
I like both, you know. Different kind of vibe. Gig at a push probably, but I do like a show.
Yeah. Final one. beach or mountains?
Mountains. I'm not very good at sitting still.
I'm with you.
Nice.